Bristol City Council Environment and Sustainability Committee. I'm aware there's one tentative appointment of a member of committee, but since we're not certain about his attendance, we will start since we're on time. Thank you all for coming. Introductions. Do we need introductions to the members of the committee? You're pointing at the agenda behind my head.
Sorry, that's just a declaration of interest.
Yeah. But we will come to that. Yeah. Okay. So, do we need any introduction to members of the committee in our public forum? I hope not. I think you've been before. Just to save a minute. Okay. Safety information. We're not aware of any fire drill, so if there is a siren, it is the real thing, and the emergency evacuation procedure is as usual. If the alarm sounds, we leave the room calmly through the lobby area and out the main front door and turn right down the ramp towards the cathedral side, and we'll assemble in front of the cathedral. Hopefully that will not be necessary. Apologies for absence and substitutions. We have had one apology, haven't we?
Yes, we've had an apology from Councillor Mishnat.
Okay, and I gather he's unwell, so we wish him well. Hopefully he'll be back soon. At the moment, we're not aware if Councillor Kent is here, but we are quorate. Declarations of interest. Item 3. Do we have any?
Yes, so for point 3, with the fund, I work for Heart of Bay 13 and we've been a recipient of that funding in my other job role, so I'll be stepping out during that.
Okay, thanks very much. That is a past award of funding that is in the report.
We have had an email where we're likely to apply for that fund.
All right, thank you for letting us know that. Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Are there any concerns with accuracy or any of the content of the minutes before we agree them? Are they agreed? Whoever? I see some nods. So we're confirming they're a correct record of that meeting. Thank you very much. So item 5 is Chair's announcements, and I've got a few things I'd just like to cover. Firstly, just to note that today a revised forward plan for the committee was published, so some of the future items are now updated on the website of the City Council. Secondly, we do normally have a finance report at each committee meeting. The last one was period 5, the 5th month, on the 7th of November, and there's only needs to be a new report if there are exceptions, if there is a material change to the forecast of the budget within the remit of the committee, and that has not happened, so we're avoiding a report on this occasion. It's a shorter period that we've covered since then, and it will be updated at the next meeting of the committee on the 27th of February. Thirdly, people may be aware at the last full meeting of the council there was golden motion that was about the health of rivers in the city. That was approved by full council unanimously, I'm glad to say. It did ask this committee to look at certain issues, but it also referred the matter to the One City Environment Board. So just to let everyone know, the One City Environment Board did meet last week, did receive a copy of that golden motion, did look at the requests for the issues in it to be looked at, and has already started setting up a working group to work with partners, including Wessex Water, South West Water, who own Bristol Water Company, and we're seeking a substitute member of the Environment Agency who could be on that working group as well, and other members of the One City Environment Board from our partners. So I'm glad to say, progress has immediately sort of started on that, and we will get, with time, we will be setting up a meeting of that and hope to report back on that. Thank you. There's also some good news in terms of funding. Managing land for nature is one of our objectives through another, after river quality, is another of our objectives in terms of managing more of the city for nature, for wildlife. And the good news is just over £1 million has been secured to do more land management in the city, particularly with grassland management. It's thanks to the West of England Combined Authorities Green Recovery Fund, the majority of the funds, plus additional match funding from the City Council to bring it over £1 million. And that will improve grassland management in the city. It will also involve a volunteer programme, which is excellent, and through that, hopefully some skills development work, which may lead to employment in nature recovery. So that's good news. And the final item is concerning recycling and waste services. Since we last met, the members of the committee did receive some proposals for a consultation. We carried out about an hour's work on that after the last meeting of the committee. Those proposals have all been fed into updating proposals for consulting on changes to recycling and waste. I'm sorry to say at the same time, an early copy of that document was leaked. No one has acknowledged who leaked it, but what it's done is it's caused a lot of rumour and concern for something that's yet to be prepared and consulted and is not with the public yet. What we do want is a very full, informative public discussion so we can discuss how to secure better recycling services to deal with escalating waste costs, which are rising and will continue to rise without further action. And partly as a matter of the costs and also new regulatory requirements, and also to improve the reliability of recycling services and get what is currently a sort of steady and to some extent, sadly, slightly declining recycling rate on the upward path towards the target we do have in the city and that local government has for 65% recycling. At the moment, we're only about 45% recycling, and more than half of what's in the refuse bins is recyclable material. So there will be work on that. I'm hoping there will be consultation in the new year. It will take account of the feedback from members of this committee and a lot of work by officers and Bristol Waste. And so watch this space, but unfortunately, as I say, because of a leak of an outdated document, there are rumours around, but we'll make sure the full information is available for the public to play their full part in commenting on those in the future. Should be in the new year. That's the last of the chair's announcements. Public forum. And we have 2 items, but I think only one member of the public with a question. So, microphone coming over to you, Suzanne. You've had a response to the initial questions. They're being put on the screen right now. Do you have any follow-up questions?
I was trying to think of something to make up, but actually I don't. But while I've got the microphone, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the quality of the answers. It's really nice to ask a question and think that it's been taken seriously and people have gone out of their way to give some information. So thank you very much.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm delighted by that, and thanks to officers who did a lot of work to prepare that. That's great. Okay, so that's the public forum, and the next item is our first report, which is an update on decarbonisation, and this is something we wanted to have, and the Vice Chair, Councillor King, said it would be helpful to know where we stood in terms of the Council's decarbonisation strategy, and I agree. And it's brought together a lot of the work to date. There will be a future report about plans ahead. So this is showing where we've got to as a city, and I'm glad we've got, it looks like quite an excellent record for comparable authorities. But but for information, we're going to go through some of the material that says how we've made improvements to our carbon footprint as an authority. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Alex Minshall. I'm Semel Sitting Climate Change Manager. And as Councillor Fredell said, this is really to just inform the committee of the progress that's been made to date and what we're forecasting over the next few years, and also then to invite views on how you want that programme to develop and to invite you to ask us, if you wish, to bring back another paper that sets out what that future strategy might look like. So the City Council has been working on reducing its carbon emissions for many years, but in 2019, the former mayor set out a new target for our corporate direct emissions. So those are emissions directly under the control of the City Council from property and vehicles that we have control over. And he set a very ambitious target, which was to be carbon neutral for that scope of emissions by 2025. And that has driven a substantial amount of investment and activity through City Leap, through investment of the City Council's resources in that decarbonisation. The report sets out on the next page the measures that have been implemented to achieve that over the period, and the graph shows the image of those reductions. So we baseline the target back for 2015-16, and then you see that there's been successive reductions in the years from that, and that's a 60% reduction to last financial year, so 23-4 financial year, and that's a reduction from 18,000 tonnes to 7,000 tonnes of emissions falling into that basket. And that's been through energy efficiency in our state, reducing some of the council's buildings, investing in a spend to save scheme that colleagues in the energy service here have been running, the use of green gas for some of our larger sites like City Hall, and then also renewable electricity being supplied from our own renewable generators, wind turbines and solar. We've also benefited from the investment made in the street lighting, that's the word I'm looking for, in replacing many of the existing lamps with LEDs. They were replaced some years ago with the white lights that were more efficient, and then the LEDs are now even more efficient. And that's going to generate a saving of about £2 million a year, and will quite rapidly pay for its investment over a period. And so there's also been work on our fleet and replacing many of the smaller vehicles on the vehicle fleet. So these are vehicles that have got a City Council badge on them, as opposed to vehicles that might be used by staff in visiting customers, residents' homes or whatever. And we've also benefited from reduction in the intensity of the electricity supplied by the national grid. And so all those things combined, you see, has brought down our emissions to last year. And then if we look forward into a forecast, there's a few things that we're looking to do in terms of, you remember from the previous committee about increasing the supply of green gas, or the use of green gas, the electricity sleeving arrangements that, again, colleagues to my right are working on, and also continued to replace the vehicle fleet, subject to a funding bid that we have with government for that. And if all those measures come together, what we're forecasting for financial year 25-6, which is the target year, is that our emissions would be just about 2,000 tonnes, which is about, annoyingly, 88% reduction from the target. It'd be nice if it was 90, but still it will be a fairly phenomenal achievement, I think. And that's through a combination of that reducing demand and then providing buildings, the energy demand we do have, with lower emission fuels. And we've looked around at colleagues in the Core Cities Network, which is some major cities outside of London, in England, actually in all of the countries of the UK. And we haven't been able to find any of the other cities that have got better performance than we have to date, or that we are forecasting. We're all using slightly different boundaries and definitions, but we think we're pretty reasonably confident saying it's the best performance of those major cities in the country. So that's great, and I think worth to celebrate that and to thank colleagues here and the many others that have been involved in doing that, in making that achievement possible. And then as we look forward, because it's not quite done yet, the decarbonisation programme that Helen and colleagues are in the Energy Service and in City Leap are running to deliver the investment that Cabinet made last year in the corporate decarbonisation of our state, and that's taking, that will continue to reduce emissions. And if we see that graph, what that's showing is the emissions are being reduced, but actually the energy consumption is being reduced. Because I should have explained on these graphs, what we've got is the where the hashed sections are, those are where they're carbon neutral sources of supply. So we're still using that energy, but they're carbon neutral. Or they're carbon neutral. And you see what that orange band, the important bit to pull out from this is that orange band in the middle, which is our gas consumption, is declining, sort of yellowy orange, is declining over time as that decarbonisation programme replaces gas boilers with district heating connections or with individual site air source heat pumps. You may wonder why the electricity wedge there at the top is declining, and that's because as the national grid decarbonises, if you like, the carbon savings of the sleeving arrangements diminish. That doesn't mean you want to stop doing it, because there are other benefits as well, but it means that that sort of accountancy saving is reducing. That's assuming the grid was to decarbonise completely by 2030, which is an ambition, but we know may be very hard to realise. And so that will leave us with a very small, a few hundred tonnes of emissions from the residual of our fleet. And what that is going to, and the reason we haven't shown this is that that will require further capital allocations to replace the remaining diesel vans that we've got, or diesel vehicles that we've got, with electric vehicles as they become available, and we're able to fund their replacement. So that's the forecast, and then so that's great. And you might think, job done. We can now go back and sit on our laurels or concentrate on one of the other issues that we've got. And what we've set out in the table in the document is the strategy that has underpinned the work to date, and what is being sort of planned over the coming couple of years. And it's this sort of hierarchy of let's reduce our energy demand first, then replace it with clean electricity, as much of it generated locally as we can, both from our own sources or locally, and then replacing our gas consumption, using green gas as an interim, which is a previous thing you discussed before, and then that replacement of vehicle fleet. And then finally, the point is to say we're not planning in the current strategy to offset any of our residual emissions, but to instead focus the Council's resources on reducing our emissions in the future more rapidly. And so the table hopefully sets out what we have done and what we are doing in the current plans in a fairly logical framework for you. And you can see how decisions that the committee is making today and later are fitting into that structure. And then finally, the point is about the scope of this. So I said at the beginning that we focused on buildings that were directly in our control, and those are counted at the baseline for about 18,000 tonnes. There is a much bigger number associated with the other emissions that are less in our control, and that's through our companies like Bristol Waste or Gorham Homes. It's through where we have local authority maintained schools and nurseries that are then managed by schools and head teachers. Also our leisure centres, all the goods and services that we buy, including our capital programme, which involves a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, and the operation of our council housing, and as well as then finally our commercial investment estate. So we've got a much bigger footprint, and really the invitation to the committee is to say, having got in place a plan to decarbonise that direct core of emissions, how do you want us to look at other emissions in that wider footprint? So in terms of the recommendations, it's to note the progress and hopefully celebrate that progress, to note the kind of strategy and see if you've got any comments on that committee, on that strategy, and how you might wish to see that evolve. And then finally, ask us to invite us to bring back to you proposals on how we both consolidate the emissions that we're already making in the direct estate, but also look at that wider footprint and which areas you're most interested that we bring back, if such a thing exists. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex. yeah, it's sort of really impressive to see all the work that's been underway. And I know I was asking for several years, what's the gap? How far are we getting towards closing that gap since the climate emergency declaration and since the 2025 target? But this sets it out very clearly, and I really appreciate that. Firstly, are there any questions about the report itself, the work that's been done, the issues that have been sort of accounted for in those charts and so on? Yep, Councillor King. Yep.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Fodor said. It's an incredible achievement, and I think it speaks to a cross-party consensus on a lot of this issue, but also just the amount of work that Office has done is really remarkable, and I hope that there's the way that there can be some recognition for this, because it is a huge achievement and something you should all be very proud of. I'm certainly proud of the council for this work. I guess I've had a few reflections though. I mean, it also, this work, began in 2015. That's a few years ahead of that declaration. So it does speak that this, the climate crisis didn't begin in 2019, did it? It began quite a while ago. So it's just great to see that that's been a progressive direction that's been taken for quite a few years. And yeah, it's brilliant. But I guess the fleet for me is the one that's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. And, it's the one that, if you're going to look crudely at those diagrams, it's the one that sort of like stays as a wedge while the others tend to get smaller and smaller, and that one's just staying where it is. There was a drop in one of the diagrams. There was, from the first year to the second year, from 24-25, this year, it predicts the red goes down by about 50%, and then it stays predicted to be that again. So I'm just wondering what that initial reduction that you're predicting is. But also, I'm more interested to know about the parameters of the funding, and just to understand the different projects that CAS funding is being suggested to. It's a finite amount, isn't it? What is it, 40 million, something like that? But what that money is proposed to be spent for, I'm sure we could spend it several times over and do amazing things with it. And I guess it's how we come to a decision, pending a government decision, on how best to spend that money for the city in terms of the things it could be delivering, active travel solutions, etc. So I'm just interested to see where the thoughts are on that.
Colleagues, I'll certainly have a go at the CAS spending bit. I'm happy to hand over to others on the other bits if they want to. Shall I start off though? So thank you, Councillor. In terms of the Clean Air Zone funding, as you know, there was a package of sustainable transport provisions that were agreed by the Cabinet actually a little while ago. So they include some 10 million towards the City Council's contributions to the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement. Those schemes have to be delivered by 2027. There's a range of them regularly reported to Transport Connectivity Committee, but big sustainable transport corridor programmes generally, and some livable neighbourhood work. There is some money that is going towards additional supported services, bus services, and there's some work going on around that. And there is also a significant amount of money going towards neighbourhood transport schemes, yes. So I think those are the main things, but it was a package that was brought forward under the Cabinet. Yep, hand over to colleagues, thank you.
In relation to the reference to government and the government bid, we've put forward a proposal for us to utilise existing funds that we hold for fleet replacement that is accessed or accessible by businesses and not the council. So there's an opportunity that we've put forward to JACU, Government Department, to see if we could release that money to utilise our replacement of our fleet. So we do hopefully get a decision in the early new year, probably January, February. So that will be really welcomed in the context of concluding, I guess, our fleet replacement, which we've made great inroads to in relation to transfer to, replace to EV, but there's still a way to go, as you indicated in terms of the graph.
Okay, thanks very much. Are there any other sort of queries? Yeah, Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Alex and the team. I was just thinking, you posed the question about what further areas we need to look at. I think with the waste company, I think we need to be assured that they've got their own plan, and we need to know what timeframes they're working to. There's also a risk with the waste company, because I think we need to make a decision on whether we continue with the waste company at some point. Is it in a year or two that we make that decision? So potentially one of the options could be that we bring those services back in-house, and then that would have a major impact on the figures in front of us. So I think we need to see something on the waste company for those two particular reasons. And I think with schools as well, because I think they really struggle with capacity just to focus on education. So really struggling with budgets and teaching assistants and things like that. So for us then to ask them to focus on this in some sort of strategic way, I don't think they'll have the capacity. So I think that's an area that we could probably assist with, and it would probably be good to have maybe a piece of work that demonstrates what the picture is at the moment and how potentially schools could get to a better position. And then finally on fleet, obviously is a very long-standing issue, and some of the issues relating to the stagnant nature of the progress will be around the types of vehicles available and specialist vehicles. I'm just a little bit concerned that we limit ourselves to one way of owning vehicles, so we always insist on buying our own vehicles, and we don't look at leasing as an option. So potentially if we lease some maybe more efficient vehicles for a few years, with the view that by the time the lease comes up after 3 years or whatever the length of the lease is, then even more efficient vehicles would be available at that stage. I think that's something we need to look at, and that's potentially an issue around how we procure things and our finance rules and things like that. But again, it's not always just about physical interventions. It's also about how we operate from a bureaucratic point of view as well, in terms of dealing with some of these issues.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. So three particular areas of scope: our council-owned company, or at least one of them, schools, and the fleet, and that's a helpful suggestion there.
Yes, helpful suggestions around. So I might have a go at the waste one. Do you want to have a go at the fleet, Mr. Fleet? And I'm not quite sure what we'll say about schools, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you, Councillor. In terms of Bristol Waste Company, of course, a key partner to work with in terms of emissions, whatever the future structure looks like, and we're working closely with them, as you know. There will be a decision needed around the contract that will come through committees, over the next year or so. Yes, so a key decision that comes forward. But wherever that work sits, we'll be working closely around emissions. In terms of fleets, do you want to?
If I can just add one point on Bristol Waste Company, as part of their business plan process, there will be a sustainability focus and a sustainability element in relation to their plans moving forward. So we're going through the draft business planning process with them now. So we should see that, you will see that as we go into the new year. So that would be well received, I'm sure. In the context of fleet, I think what's encouraging is, and as you indicate, there's the EV solution, for a better word, for the various vehicles that we've got has always been a challenge. There is a decision coming through in the new year in relation to tippers. So in the context of there is now suitable and viable solutions for tippers on an EV, which is really welcomed, particularly from our cage vehicles for parks and housing. We do lease and we do hire, but it is a really important point that we shouldn't just purely look at the buy-in option. So continue to work closely with procurement colleagues to work out the best consideration for us as a council. So yeah, take on board your comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, in terms of schools, we'd obviously be looking to work with them, as well. I mean, obviously those that are part of our estate as well as our partner schools. So that's further work that we'll be doing.
I was just going to say that obviously for schools we run an energy club, so any electricity they buy through that would be part of our renewable supply arrangements when the sleeving comes into place. So for the schools that participate, we are also looking at potential projects and schools through City Leap as well. That's a key area that we need to start building out now that we've sort of made some progress on our corporate estate.
Yes, I should have said actually that because they weren't in the scope of the 2025 target doesn't mean there wasn't lots of action happening in all of the areas I mentioned and set out in the paper on reducing emissions, be it with schools, with our investment properties, with our procurement, with our major projects. So it's not that we've not been doing anything on them, it's just they weren't captured within the scope of that target.
Thanks very much for that clarification. Yeah, Councillor Finch.
Thanks very much. This actually sort of leads on from that a bit. So, I guess the target and therefore the report does reflect like a limited scope. Council rather than citywide, and doesn't include scope 2 and 3 emissions as far as I understand. And I think that was really transparent in the report, so that's really brilliant. And I should have said beforehand as well, I do think that this is a really amazing achievement. So I'm really, very sort of happy to see the work that's been done and the work that's planned. Around the limited scope, I think it's really important to be transparent around that. So I'm really grateful that you have been, and that Alex, you mentioned that. I think the risk that I'm aware of is that when we're looking just through a small window, there can be a temptation to displace outside of that window rather than to actually be reducing overall. Looking through the measures that have been gone through so far to reach the reductions we've got, I was confident that almost all of them do actually represent real reductions rather than displacement outside of the limited scope we're looking at. The only one that I was a bit concerned about was the reducing the number of buildings operated by the council. I guess I sort of had if you wanted to come back on that.
Yes, I think it's fair to say we haven't reduced the number of buildings the City Council uses in order to reduce our carbon footprint. We've benefited from that reduction that's been made for other operational or financial reasons. It's just then come off our accounts. So it's not a disposal strategy to reduce our footprint, our carbon emissions. It's a strategy to make our property use more efficient. I think that's Director of Property. I probably should let you answer that question.
But I think, as you know, we've got a property transformation programme of which ensuring that we have an estate that we can afford and we can manage and operate efficiently is important. And standing up a corporate landlord model, giving consideration of assets that may be surplus to requirements if we were to dispose and they were outside of the council, then therefore, yes, that would have a positive impact. I think we know the challenges of our estate. We do own a lot of estate, commercial, operational, and therefore we need to be very, very transparent with committee, as we have done with Cabinet and current committee around our disposal process, our surplus process, and to do it in a managed way. But that, yes, the expectation that the estate would be smaller, that would have benefit from a carbon reduction perspective.
Is that right for me to just come back on that? Sorry. No, thank you. That really helps. And I guess, I guess I was just wanting to make sure that in all of this, and I understand the reason for needing to focus on this smaller scope first, because this is the place where we have the most direct control. But I guess I was reassured to hear that other things are being focused on alongside it. Just wanted to make sure that we're always aware of the bigger picture and looking at what's going to make the biggest impact more widely, rather than just having the blinkers on, if that makes sense. But no, I think I'm confident that is happening.
Thanks for that. I've Councillor Crawford, then Councillor Tate.
Thank you. Yeah, I just echo sentiments that it's great work. It's definitely something to celebrate over Christmas, and yeah, I think you all deserve a well-deserved break over the next few weeks. Hopefully, you're managing to get that. My question is it's about looking ahead and thinking about what our next targets will be, in particular with regards to this scope. I know Councillor Finch has already touched on kind of those additional emissions. I mean, I assume the only real way we could go from a 0% target would to be carbon positive. And I was wondering do you think that would actually be a viable target to do that without requiring carbon offsets in any way?
I don't know. So I think it would be really hard to think of ourselves as being carbon positive for direct emissions if we've then also got a very, if we weren't significantly reducing our more indirect emissions. So that would be the place I would go next, if you like, is to continue to reduce those emissions whilst, as part of that, generating more of our own energy, which would how we'd get that kind of positivity. But David, I don't know if you've got any. I'm not expecting you to have an answer or thoughts, but if you have,
I think it would definitely be the case. We can get our energy supply down to zero. So what we are using, we can have a zero carbon. But trying to sort of go further than that is challenging. And I think colleagues are right. The focus should then be on the wider estate. So, for example, we use a lot of gas in the housing blocks. The solution we developed there has got to take into account the cost impact on the tenants, but that's clearly a big carbon emission area that we should be addressing between now and sort of 2030.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. That was my only question, really. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
I would just like to say that I appreciated that you took this to the community leadership panel as well within CCA, and actually as you're looking at all of those A to F that we need to explore, I would encourage you to then keep going back and having that dialogue within that group, because then you've woven the Just Transition Declaration within the work, and to maybe as you go for the new contracts with things, to encourage your suppliers and people that were making those connections to also sign up to the declaration, as it's a key thing that the council have signed up to, and I'd encourage City Leap to sign up. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us about that. Yes, and certainly that discussing the Just Transition Declaration has been very much part of the One City Environment Board discussions about climate strategy and nature strategy, because it has to be done
Alex,
in that
it's been really good, and Helen at both coming to the panel as well and presenting things for them to make that discussion on, so that we can make sure that we're doing just that, particularly as the next ones really cut across communities as well, especially when you're looking at council housing. You know, a lot of council housing tends to end up being in the poorer wards, and so that poses many barriers and challenges, and it's stuff that we do need to be aware of as we move forward with that. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that. And I'd also like to say, yeah, it would be very good to see the increase in scope mapped out, because there are choices. Like, as been said, there are opportunity costs. If we focus on the narrow scope, we might neglect the wider scope that has a potentially bigger impact or social impact or so on. The other thing I'd like to sort of say is, as well as looking at that, I feel it's quite important to note the sort of 5 points in the strategy, what you described as the hierarchy, because it is important to say we're trying to make real changes, make real savings of energy or of emissions or both, and that the last resort. This is work I did at the Environment Agency, said offsetting must be the very last resort, because it means you're not doing something that you could do yourself or with your projects or with your partners. So I like to support that hierarchy and the principles in that. Are there any more suggestions in terms of things we'd like to see when we're going to look forward again? Yeah? Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. Given pizza, obviously we know our biggest emitters at the moment, potentially the crematoriums. So I just wonder, do we have a time frame at the very least for making a decision on what we're doing with them? Because I know there's a sort of a decision that keeps getting kicked down the road with the crematoriums. So I just wondered, at the very least, do we have a date for when we'll make a decision?
As your name dropped me, I'll give say a couple of things. I might hand back to John, but at the moment the decision is that they're still operating and they are part of our estate. So we are actively working with Helen and the client team, particularly with Amoresco, to look at options that enables it to be a viable solution for to decarbonise the crematorium. So we are actively looking at that until otherwise told. But John, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on the
Councillor specifically did name you, Pete, so I should recall. No, I mean, the key issue is funding, Councillor. It is quite expensive to replace, particularly the Camfords, but the payback in terms of carbon is pretty significant. So I'm confident we'll find a model. We do need to do a bit more work, but we'll bring it forward as soon as we can.
Sorry, just on that quickly before I move on to my other point. Is it green gas supplied, the crematorium at the moment? And yeah. And so if we move to a model that allowed that to be electrified, would the savings be significant carbon-wise?
So obviously Camford's our biggest carbon emitter, so in terms of actual carbon savings, not sort of ignoring the green gas, yes, that would be relatively significant. The other benefit will be that we're reducing the green gas that we're purchasing, because obviously at the moment we are buying the green gas for it, so there's a cost saving there in terms of the green gas supply, which is reasonably substantial as well.
So I suppose the benefits would be more system-wide. So as Councillor Finch talked about the window, if we look at the council's footprint, it may not make a huge difference in the accountancy terms because of the carbon accountancy terms, because they're both rated 0. But what it does is then release that green gas consumption for someone else to use to replace fossil gas elsewhere. So if we think of it as, it's a bit like, you don't want to just convert all your electricity supply to renewables and then use as much as you like, because you're then not releasing that renewables, so you're driving fossil fuel consumption at the end of the system. So by us, if you like, not using the green gas, someone else can benefit from it, and that will lower the overall fossil fuel consumption of the UK as a whole by a little bit.
Thanks for that. Sorry, David, did you want to come in?
No, I was going to say, and just green gas was only ever seen as an interim solution. It buys us time for a more enduring solution.
All the more reason to press for a decision to be made than on Canford. I've always been strongly in favour of keeping it, not for the reasons that we've got here, but also some of what Abby was referring to in terms of, if we no longer own it, then yes, we get to drop it off our carbon emissions, but assuming it will get operated by another third party. But it also regulates the market for funerals, and that's incredibly important thing that we do to make sure that funerals are affordable. So just on the officer recommendations for this bit as well, I just wanted to say that so I'm really in approval of bringing forward future proposals that explore the wider emissions related to the council activities. But I've got a bit of a tentative approach to it. I'd really like to understand it holistically, what the implications are, considering a lot of these services are stretched on, and their core functions, what the implications are, what the appetite is for them as well. But trying to bring, I don't know how this for schools. I think it's a really good example, because trying to bring them on board to talk about a lot of things, such as food sustainability, you know, when they're struggling to just get kids to turn up, and that's there, you know, to deliver what is a very pressing education agenda, and across a very diverse city with lots of challenging needs. Where is their appetite and capacity to take on any of this? So I guess it's just that sort of holistic view I'd like to understand and get a sort of realistic sense of how far can we go with that in a way that's fair to them, and how can we support them with that as well?
Thanks very much. So perhaps what we could bring back initially is a sort of bit of a scoping paper really that sets out these are the issues, or an issues paper, that these are the issues associated with each of these sectors. Where do you want us to go? Where do you want us then to dive in more detail or more concrete activity? I'm getting nods, so that's good.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. And it also kind of links to our wish to offer invest to save packages, whether it's sort of directly or packages that work as well as possible for those other organisations using our buildings and facilities through the City Elite joint venture, or indeed any other support and funding we can share, because if we can make it easy for them to save money on energy, they will have more money for their core purposes. And efficiency, as was said very, very, very sort of plainly there, being efficient means you don't waste the energy, whether it's renewable or not. You make it available elsewhere. So that's helpful. Councillor Kent, where you came in part way through, we're looking at the decarbonisation report, item 7, and any further comments on the recommendations. If you had any, feel free.
I didn't. Apologies, I'm late, Chair. I thought this meeting was at 6 o'clock, so I thought I was turning up early. So I walked through the door.
If there are no further comments at this stage, the recommendation, we've had some really helpful suggestions, and we need to see them sort of assembled in terms of scope and the sort of reach of the council, and both the direct and the indirect benefits and the opportunity costs. So the recommendations, the 4, are to note the progress made to date. I won't read it all out because it's there on the screen. To note the decarbonisation strategy that's set out here, and remembering that we have future decisions as well as past ones that are contributing to this. We've had comments on the plans and the strategy, and we've all, I think, all delighted with the progress that's been made, and it's been many years and many people contributing to it, and we're really grateful for that. And then we're going to have ask you to bring forward a future proposals report that will consolidate that and talk about the direct emissions and then the wider sort of story. Recognising also, I suppose, that we're the direct and indirect emissions of the council, and then our partnerships beyond that is a bigger story still in terms of the One City climate strategy that we ought to look at some point as well. So is everyone happy to note this and to confirm the 4 points there? I'm seeing nods. That's excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So complementing this in some ways, we're moving on to the agenda item 8, which is the electricity supply extensions, which has to be heard here because it's a key decision and it helps get us ready for future work that's noted in that report. Thank you.
That's right. So committee may remember we came to for approval back in July this year because our current electricity supply arrangements are due to expire in March 2025, and when we replace them, we're looking to replace them with a sleeving arrangement, which means that we can pool renewable generation activity, and together with BCC's electricity supply, we can pull that together with other demand for electricity and ensure that we get renewable energy supply. Sorry, my laptop's just shut down. So let me open it. We have, that was approved during the July committee, and we were anticipating that we would have arrangements in place by March. We've had some promising engagement with suppliers since that date, so it looks like we are going to be able to move forward with those arrangements, which is really good. but unfortunately we've hit a few technical roadblocks whilst we've been looking at how we technically get through the local generation element of the sleeving arrangements. And that roadblock has primarily come up because of the restrictions around how we go about procuring that local generation. And obviously, from our perspective, we really want that to be locally generated electricity because that's a central part of what we're doing. We've been working through a solution with Amoresco, and we believe we now have got a workable solution, which means that we can still go ahead with this. But the time it's taken for us to work through that solution has meant we're now not going to have the sleeving arrangements in place by March 2025. So we're coming back to committee today to ask if we can extend our current electricity supply arrangements for a further 6 months plus an additional 6 months to enable us to continue to be supplied through our framework rather than going back to standard rates whilst we finalise the sleeving arrangements. 6 months will take us to October 2025. We're asking for the option to then extend a further 6 months if needed, so that we're not sort of coming back with the same ask if for some reason the sleeving arrangements take longer than October. The estimated additional cost for that means that over the 6 month period we'd be looking at a £3.5 million electricity bill. That's around £640,000 more than we would have been paying if we'd already got the sleeving arrangements in place in the original anticipated timetable. I think that's pretty much the entirety of the sort of background information. In terms of the recommendations themselves, what that means is that we're asking committee to approve deferring the original budget envelope that we had outlined for the sleeving arrangements until we get into the sleeving arrangements. And then we will need to have approval to continue with our current contracting arrangements with Laser through our framework for the 6 month period plus the additional 6 month period. We also ask in committee to just note that we will be looking at a slightly different procurement model than when we first came back in July, due to the way we've had to get around the procurement issue that we've come across whilst we've been developing the proposal.
Just to sort of make it clear, the reason why we need to bring the paper to seek your approval to extend the current contract is our time cost envelope is running out at the end of March next year. So we're not allowed to spend any more on that contract unless you give us permission to do so.
Sure. Thanks very much. And thanks for saying that clearly, that the sort of 3 parts to this, that what we have agreed is slipping, unfortunately, but it is still planned. That there are the contractual matters, the three parts to that, and then finally to note that and I'm delighted you have been able to come up with an arrangement that will let us set up what we want to set up, albeit in a slightly different format, by working with Amoresco, who are our joint venture partner. So that means we will have in place the thing we do want in terms of bringing together local generation, not just from the council, but from other community and other suppliers, and making it available locally, which is the goal we're sort of seeking. So we've got five recommendations. Were there any queries about this? Okay, Councillor Kent.
Thanks. Just a quick one, really. How confident are you that we'll be able to deliver the project by next October? Because obviously £643,000 of lost savings is a lot to the council, and if we have to incur that again for another 6 months, that's a substantial amount. So I guess my question is, do you have enough resources to ensure this is delivered within the timetable put, and are you confident that this project will be delivered within that time?
So we're working hard on it at the moment. It's a very active work stream. Amoresco are assisting us on it, which is helping with the resource requirements. We're in active discussions with community generators and also actively looking for demand for the sleeving as well. So it is a novel arrangement though, so we don't know if there are other challenges that are going to come up out of the woodwork that we haven't anticipated. We're hopeful this is the main challenge, and we now have got a fairly good roadmap forward. But I think we're fairly confident in terms of our delivery at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that on the sort of the question of resources, we're now splitting the workload between ourselves and Amoresco. So Amoresco is very much taking over the generation side of the pool. They'll be dealing with all the contractual and legal issues around that, and that's probably where some of the most complex areas are. But we've got the Amoresco team that's working on this are actually specialists in this area, so they're bringing a lot of their own expertise to this. Our focus is now shifted more towards the demand side, and that's not exactly conventional, but it's certainly more conventional, and we're confident we can deal with that side in-house.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor King?
Sorry, just a quick one. I just to say I love the ambition of this. I think it's really exciting, and I'm right in saying it's another one that's quite first of its kind in the UK, and you know that kind of the opportunity to not also get this right. And I realise there's an element of risk in that. I'm quite pro-risk actually in terms of those kind of things, because I think there's an opportunity there to model to the rest of the country if we get it right, and also the learnings that they can take from it. And learn how to roll that out across in other major local authorities. I just a quick question on some of the community energy companies, BEC, etc., who I know are watching this quite closely and are really interested in it. Whether there's some anxiety with them, are they being communicated with quite closely to sort of understand where we are and what we're working through? Just to make sure that we're keeping them well informed of and updated.
Very much so. In fact, just before this meeting, we were having a meeting with BEC to discuss the new mechanism with them and introduce them to Amoresco. So we have that dialogue going now. We had a similar meeting with Ambition Lawrence Weston a couple of weeks ago. So the dialogue has very much started, but both of those groups are interested in what we're proposing. They see lots of opportunities there. So I think we're confident we can bring them along. And with Amoresco taking over the generation side, it solves what to them was going to be a procurement challenge. Going through the council's process involves a lot of administrative effort. It's a different arrangement with Amoresco, and I think both groups seem more comfortable with that arrangement. But it's early days yet.
Yeah, just further to that, because from memory, I think some of those potential suppliers, are currently in their own contracts that might be coming up soon, which gives us the opportunity to get in there. Does this delay affect any of that at all in terms of potential supply we could deliver into the sleeve? Because we're not ready, that means they have to continue with their current arrangement or go into a longer term arrangement that we then can't take advantage of for a number of years. Is that another risk potentially?
Yeah, I have to be careful because I can't sort of discuss contractual arrangements for non-council bodies. But what we have said to them is there is flexibility in the new arrangement, so they don't have to be ready to go on the 1st of October. If it's going to be a few months after that before they're ready to go, that's fine. We just need to agree a timetable with them as to when they are ready to come on board, and then we'll bring them on board at that point. Whatever arrangements they need to put in place between now and then, we'll discuss with them when we agree the timetabling for all this.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, and it is really positive that we can put in place and enable these sort of things with partners, with local generators, with community-owned suppliers, and our own ambition to generate more sort of through our sites as well. If there are no further sort of questions, can we go on to the recommendations? And if these are on the screen, well, we've got 5. So we've got the first one on the screen, which is to approve the deferral of the previously mentioned budget, as was noted. The second one is the contractual points, to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair to enter this new call of contract for 6 months plus 6 potential further months for the sleeved electricity supply, as set out. Third is to authorise to enter into a new call of contract, 6 months and plus 6 months for the non-half-hourly and unmetered sites, as set out there. Fourthly, to invoke any subsequent extensions and variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded, up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in the report. And then finally to note, and I'm really glad to see this, I must say, the proposed procurement approach for establishing the sleeve pool with Amoresco leading the establishment of the generation pool and the City Council establishing the demand pool, which is what we discussed already in July. So there's the 5 points. Can we take them all together and see if people approve? I see plenty of nods. So, yep, that's approved. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, just to be technical, can I get a seconder
Oh, sorry.
to move the report? Yeah.
Seconded.
Yes, seconded. Sorry, because it's a key decision. We have to do that. Yeah. Thank you for that, confirming all that. I look forward to the progress with that. Thank you for all the work that's been done to date. It's really impressive. And there is a lot of learning I appreciate. So agenda item 9, we've got an item, not a decision item, but for note, because there were initiatives during the pre-election period, and this is the Bloomberg Philanthropies Youth Climate Action Funding. And we're noting that having declared an interest, Councillor Tate will leave this part of the meeting, but thank you for your attendance. So this is something that happened in sort of in and around the 2 elections that were this year, which meant it wasn't sort of brought to any sort of political forum at the time. But it has achieved funding that has helped youth climate action, which I think is really welcome in the city, and it's hoping that we shall have more. So would you like to briefly introduce it?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Fodor. So, yes, in March this year, almost last year, we became aware of a funding opportunity from Bloomberg Philanthropies, who has set up a youth climate action fund, and a number of cities applied, and Bristol and Glasgow were 2 UK cities that were able to secure funding from this. So ours was we were able to distribute grants of about £35,000 to 11 organisations, which are set out in the appendix to the report. And these are all sort of small grants, as you might imagine, if you divide 35 by 11. And we've seen some really quite significant impacts from those projects. They're all just in the final stages of wrapping up, and we'll get some reports from them in the new year. We did, however, hold a round table in conference room with some of the organisations that had been funded and heard from some of the young people directly. And it was great to see the work that they were doing with the small amounts of resource. We've also, because of that went well, we've been invited to apply for a further round, which would be £65,000 or so to be able to distribute. And that would then issue grants according to the funders' sort of boundaries of between £800 and £3,500 each for projects that we need to complete this coming year. Our plan really is to sort of replicate the first round that we did, where we used a contractor to manage the process on behalf, Centre for Sustainable Energy, who run a number of grant projects and also youth engagement projects. We've set out in the paper the sort of objectives of the grant programme round 2, should we be successful in securing that funding, which we're optimistic about but hasn't yet been announced. The criteria that we'd apply to the selection of those projects and who we think should be on the membership selection panel. And just to sort of note that, you know, the funders set out the age boundary for this between, they call youth, is 15 to 24. And there are other rules that prohibit certain types of funding and funding individuals, for example. And then our objective really is to focus this support for young people and communities that are experiencing disadvantage. And we've set out in the criteria in the appendix, which we used in round 1, and which we plan to continue, since they seem to be quite effective, and also then proposed that we have the similar panel, which was members of my service, so this climate change team, the community development team, the Centre for Sustainable Energy, using their Bright Green Futures, which is a sort of young person's engagement programme, and also an expert young person, which last time was one of the Bright Green Future alumni, and by all accounts provided a really valuable insights into the panel discussions. So that's the gist of this paper, really, to invite, it's a non-key decision, we're really just inviting those, hopefully, to note that we've been successful in round 1, to support the implementation of round 2 if we are successful, and to then provide any comments on the objectives, criteria and panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much for this. And I was able to be at the round table that occurred with some of the project groups, and I have to say it was like they've done some really amazing work, really worthwhile, really determined, and also raised some of their concerns about their climate action and the need to do more, and their wish to sort of be active. So we've got a comment at the back, Councillor Crawford. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite an interesting kind of item. This is not something that I knew that existed, so it's always interesting to learn new things about what the council's doing with regard to kind of decarbonisation and grants and things. My question was, I was wondering if you've ever reached out to the youth council that we have here. I kind of saw right at the bottom that there's a proposed panel, but potentially the youth council might be interested in being involved in some way with these grants.
Yes, we did. We didn't do it in the first round because it coincided with the youth council's election cycle, and then so there wasn't one in place at the right time for us. But yes, we have engaged with them, and 2 members of the youth council came to the round table that Councillor Fodor mentioned, and were incredibly impressive, actually, as individuals in the contribution they made. But yes, we have already reached out to them. Climate change isn't, however, one of the youth council's current priorities, but it doesn't mean that they won't necessarily want to be on that panel as well. But we could definitely consider that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it sounds great, and great to see the organisations that have already sort of benefited from it and the projects that have already happened. On the panel as well, I just wondered if there's a possibility of having a councillor on there so that there can be more sort of engagement from councillors in the process.
Absolutely, yes, that's possible.
Yeah, just one that I felt was a bit odd in terms of the recipients. The University of Bristol there as one of the recipients. I wouldn't really categorise them as a deprived organisation, so I just wondered if that was what was that all about, basically.
Yes, so they were providing that training activity with young people in disadvantaged communities. It wasn't to fund the university per se, and it wasn't targeted at their students. It was at Bristol residents. Yeah, indeed. And part of, we were constrained in the first round between election periods, so we couldn't make any of these announcements until after the general election. All funding had to be distributed by the end of September and spent by the end of December. So it was a very compressed period. So what we've now got, the opportunity, if we're successful with the funding for round 2, would be opportunity to spend a longer time inviting applications, and that will help communities that are less well mobilised already and prepared to submit applications to do so. And that's what we'll be actively seeking to do.
So just kind of follow up on that, without wanting to make perfect the enemy of the good. I suppose it would be ideal if you could have an additional filter on that, delivering with communities in areas of deprivation, also by those communities and not just for them, rather than, you know, I guess that would be the ideal. And I appreciate the majority of them were doing that, but I suppose that should be the preference. If there are enough applications being done in communities of disadvantage, so that benefit can be really felt by the people delivering it, as well as the people on both sides of whether they're a recipient or a deliverer of the projects.
Yeah, so that's more community-led initiatives as well as community-focused initiatives. Sure.
Yes, and we had a similar discussions around the opportunities for more youth-led rather than youth-serving organisations, and certainly that's our sort of preference, is to try and increasingly make it youth-led and, as you say, locality-led projects rather than from other institutions outside the neighbourhood.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. I think that I did wonder about the term climate fresque, because I've never been clear what fresques are when the university does it. But in a sense, it is true that they are being pressured to do more work in and with communities across Bristol. But ideally, of course, something led by communities is even more benefit. So, Councillor Russell, yeah.
Hi. As Councillor Crawford said, I've never heard of this fund, so it's great to hear about it. Would it be possible to have some kind of update on what the groups have been up to, what they've achieved? Don't mind whether that's a briefing or, yeah, however it comes about.
Yes, of course. So we're projects completing this week, I suppose, and we'll be getting reports. I think the deadline for them to report back to us is the end of January, or for us to report to the funder, so we can share the report that we'll send to Bloomberg Philanthropies with you.
That's really great. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm really glad we were able to look at this today, because I did want, as has been said, it's really good for us to know the sort of breadth of work that can go on and the opportunities that have come the way of the council to channel funding into neighbourhoods in Bristol and into supporting the action that so many people are concerned about. So thank you for that. Were there any more comments? No. Okay. And am I right, Councillor Russell, are you the only councillor aged 15 to 24 in this chamber normally? So you are, yeah. So it is very much directly looking at a demographic that you're part of. Great. Okay, thank you. So can we move on? It is a report to note, and there are 3 things to note. The successful implementation of round 1 of the grants, and I'm delighted we were able to do that. Supporting the implementation of round 2, if hopefully we secure further grants. And then we've had a few comments that are helpful in terms of the objectives and the criteria in the panel in the report. Can we take all of those together, if that's acceptable? Yes, nods. So can we confirm that we are noting those and agreeing with the 3 recommendations?
Yeah, well, Councillor, there was a suggestion made that we might have a councillor on the committee, on the selection panel. I guess I don't know how that might be selected or organised, or whether it's a member of the opposite, or what the process for that might be.
Do we mean a member of the youth council or a member of the...
No, Councillor Finch's suggestion, I think it was a council
or as opposed to a youth council member.
Well, they were 2 separate suggestions.
Yeah, they were.
Okay, fine. We can do that, yeah.
Are we happy with that? Okay.
I personally don't see the need to have a councillor on there. But, because how many people do you have on the panel?
3 or 4, yeah.
So you have someone from CSE?
We had 4 before, yes.
An expert young person?
Yeah.
And officers?
Yeah. I don't think adding a councillor would be make that panel too big. But I guess if we can go to party group leaders to invite that, if that's what the committee is recommending.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I suggested it, but I don't represent the committee, so maybe it would be good to do a show of hands to see if most people think that's a good idea or not.
Okay. So can we have show of hands? So to put that to party group leaders to consider selecting a councillor as well. So, I mean, I personally think it's good that we know what's going on.
Chair, I mean, if a councillor wants to do it, maybe they could just email you and the vice chair, and between you could decide it, rather than, because party group leaders are going to be wondering why we've asked them to make a decision that we could make, and I don't think they'll thank you. That's all.
That could be a helpful comment. Thank you. Yeah. So if we're happy to field any suggestions from members. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy for you two to work it out. I don't really want to be bothered by it.
I think you should just decide now.
You think we should decide now?
Well, if I'm assuming one of you three are interested in doing it.
Too old.
I'm potentially interested.
Okay, thank you. We have someone interested. Anyone else interested? No. Okay. Could that be considered? Then we've resolved it here in the meeting today. Thank you for that. And are we confirming that we support all the recommendations as all the points noted? Thank you. Okay, thanks. So that's complete. I'm really glad. I do hope we will be able to gain those additional funds, get them spent, and support all that action, because there's some really good work going on in the city, and the more grassroots work that gets achieved, the more everything strategic is also complemented, I tend to think. All right, thank you. That concludes the last item on the agenda. Thanks to everyone for attending, including those in the public gallery and all the officers and the members of the committee. And our next meeting is Thursday, the 27th of February, 2025. Thanks a lot. Good evening.